Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to a brand new video over here on the channel by the name of Leah's Chill. We are here once again to go ahead and try and do a little manga review. I wanted to talk about the first major arc of Choujin X that officially just wrapped up as of today. I made a video on the first chapter of Choujin X. If you haven't seen it already, feel free to check it out. But most of the theories that I came up with inside that video were pretty much curbed and tossed aside as more chapters came out and more of these like almost monthly releases. If you don't know about Choujin X, Ishida Sui basically said, I will release them as they're completed. And so 15 chapters in, over the process of a year, it's pretty much been a little bit more than monthly. And definitely has been very exciting so far. So the first major arc talks about our two main protagonists, Tokyo and Ellie, becoming Choujin, and then it goes into a full deep dive into a baseball player by the name of Shiozaki. So I was really trying to think about what they're trying to convey with the Choujin X story so far. There's definitely a very high amount of different conflicts happening. Tokyo and his friend Azuma haven't really been interacting all that much. Ellie hasn't been able to go back home or anything like that. And so there isn't really a clear like thesis statement for me for what Choujin X was supposed to be conveying. But this arc in particular does seem to have that sort of thesis statement. There's a single panel, talent is a curse. It distorts your way of life. And so I think that this panel right here is exactly what this section of the story is trying to convey. So basically the story is there's a boy named Shiozaki. He used to attend the school that the main character Tokyo was at. Azuma currently plays for the baseball team there. And so he was the pitcher for the baseball team before he graduated last year. So tiny connection to the main character, but just far enough away where they're not really related enough. Hell, the first panel that Tokyo meets Shiozaki, he's at a bus stop and he goes, oh, hey, you're from my school, right? And the guy goes, yeah. And then they don't talk again and the bus drives away and that's the end of their sentence. Introverts trying to interact 101. But I found that really funny because it's kind of that characterization where it's someone that you're related to, but you don't really know, so you don't really want to step over that boundary. But we start to learn more about Shiozaki. It focuses on the fact that he used to be a Koshien player who had a famous sinker ball, where his third pitch would always be his famous fastball sinker, where obviously it's a baseball where it's thrown and it like goes under and just barely gets in. Very tough to hit, for sure. And there's even this panel of basically Shiozaki's pitching. He throws his first two as fastballs, and the guy intentionally doesn't swing. Instead, he waits for the talent that Shiozaki presents, of which is his famous sinker ball. And that's one way that the talent starts to distort his life. It makes it so people don't want to fight him on an even playing field. It almost makes this professional player challenged by the idea that this guy is talented with a sinker ball. And so he wants to confront the talent directly, and that starts to distort even how Shiozaki's brain works. And so once he pitches that first sinker ball straight to the enemy, it goes and it hits the guy's shoulder, and he sinks into the earth lower than anyone has seen before. And Shiozaki is officially banned from all Koshien or baseball tournaments in the future because he's a Choujin. And so even the new antagonists that aren't really regarded inside this arc lament the fact that like it's a waste of talent. The fact that he turned into a Choujin in the middle of it because Choujin and normal people can't play baseball together. And I think that's really what this arc is trying to convey. So as the story keeps on rolling, they start to discover that Shiozaki is using his powers for his own purposes. So Choujin aren't supposed to use their powers unless like there's a big conflict happening or if there's some kind of justified cause or extreme emotional insecurity. Shiozaki throws a single coin at a vending machine and makes it slam into the ground, sinking, and immediately getting a free soda out of it, which is definitely not a big conflict. And so we kind of get those examples of Choujin using their powers to do things that normal people wouldn't be able to. And that's an example of his power in a realistic situation. On TV, we're seeing a bunch of articles inside Choujin X of sudden bank robberies with big holes in the middle of the floor. Obviously, we learn more about Shiozaki, we learn that he has a family, and the fact that he really needs to make money for the sake of his brother and sister. And so you start to make those assumptions and you realize that Shiozaki's obviously the one that's sinking the ball to be able to rob from banks very easily and pretty much circumventing the need for a drill whatsoever. Which is a really cool use of the powers, by the way. Makes you wonder how he even got in, but I guess they're just digging a hole really hard until they're able to get underneath and then toss a coin or something up. But all of his teammates that help him with the robberies suddenly turn on him when he says that he has to lay low for a bit and he can't go robbing banks anymore because obviously his powers are being focused on by the people at Yamato Mori, which is the Choujin institution that Tokyo and Ellie are at. That's the two main characters, obviously. So all of his teammates turn on him and start beating the shit out of him. Their heads turn into hands and they start just fucking wailing on him with their heads. And it's just the funniest scene, and just reading through it, it's very like surrealist, and I really enjoyed the section. And at the end of the chapter, Shiozaki starts to go into a frenzy and turns into almost this eldritch form that they seem to be calling like chaosified or something like that. It's pretty much like a second coming of the Choujin powers that take over your whole body. And so he looks like a really intimidating, like he's basically a baseball. And he starts to beat the shit out of Tokyo and Ellie, even the other characters that were introduced over the last little while. I'll talk about them later. There's a sword girl or sword guy who has big lone swords and does cool shit, and a really powerful kick girl, and she has super strength and she's big, strong. And they all have like a genuine, really tough time trying to beat down Shiozaki. And all throughout this section, you're kind of like, so direct conflict isn't working right now. How are they going to solve this problem and actually get through it? Tokyo gets hit by a pipe at the beginning, and he sinks into the earth and gets stuck with only his head above the ground and stays like that for a little while. I think it's actually really funny how they use the choreography in this section so well, because there's several moments where I wouldn't even think of that's how the sinker ball power would work. So the sinker ball power, when you throw something, the person sinks into the earth, but it's also to do with whatever he's touching. And so anytime Ellie, which is a smoke Choujin, tries to send smoke at him, all of the smoke sinks and disperses out to the sides because it's sinking away from his body. And so not only does it have like a built-in defensive mechanism in his powers, it also has the offensive mechanism where you can like throw a pipe at the roof and the whole roof collapses in. All of this makes like the fight scene really dynamic and interesting. I really enjoyed this whole section and kind of how it was all built, leading up to the big finale, which really fits well with the thesis statement, or talent is a curse, it distorts your way of life. So it seems like Shiozaki was really pent up about the idea that he no longer got the chance to play baseball. Baseball was his big passion, it was all he cared about, and he was so focused on it that losing that because his talent was so high and people couldn't compete with him, I think like would really hurt me even if people were to give up when we're trying to compete in like a tennis match, for example. Someone tossing their racket aside and going, whatever, you're too good, would piss me off. And so the world kind of did that for him because he had the Choujin power. And so he didn't really get the chance to play 100% with somebody else. And Tokyo, after getting the shit beat out of him, after having such a hard time, his mask gets cracked down the middle, and so he just kind of looks like a very lame, skinny bird boy. He picks up a pipe and takes up the batter stance. And at this moment, I realized what they were trying to do here. Because the hyper-talented and because the people with a higher bar of power aren't able to play on a similar playing field to those without talent, there really needs to be that even playing field for both parties to be able to like really have a good time with it. And so two Choujin looking each other in the eye, ready to play baseball together, is pretty much exactly what Shiozaki needed. It's pretty much exactly what he was looking for. He wanted someone who could meet him where he was and still play the game he loves the most. Tokyo, even after, so they go back and forth. Tokyo tries to hit it the first time, and it, I think he fails the first time, and it like cracks his arm, and he loses it. They explain a whole mechanic about a thing called raise, where if you get your head kicked off, you can pretty much re-heal yourself fully. And so he does that and gets ready to do the actual batter pitch, and barely dinks it and lobs it all the way up in the air. And Tokyo sinks into the earth, having lost. And so in this moment, the main character has lost. Everything is going wrong. Everyone's beat the shit out of them. They're all like bleeding and dying, and everything is bad. But the reason this works so well is because Shiozaki, the main thing he wanted was just to play baseball with somebody else. That's what he cared about the most. And so when he sees that lob go into the air, he doesn't focus on the fact that he hurt the person in front of him with his powers, because that would really hurt him. What he focuses on is the ball in the air, soaring overhead. And even this demon, like Choujinified, super crazy, scary, eldritch baseball man with his mitt in his hand goes, I got it, I got it, catches the ball, and sinks into the earth. The whole problem being solved because Tokyo was able to meet Shiozaki where he was, and was able to give him that satisfaction of baseball with somebody on a similar level to him. I love that. That's a really good thesis statement for the first big arc of Choujin X. I'm actually getting chills right now trying to describe it, and like how well I think that this idea was conveyed. It's a very like human idea, I think, that Ishida Sui is trying to convey through very like high profile extreme powers. That's kind of how you have to do it with shonen series, let's be honest. But it's very human, despite the fact that this is Superhuman X, which I think is a very, very powerful way of approaching them. And I hope that we get to see a little bit more of that. The first major arc, it was basically 7 chapters of introduction with Tokyo and Ellie and their whole story. And then it was a second arc, which was 6 chapters of the Sinker chapters. And I think this style of like layout as well, and really focusing on one story and following it to its natural endpoint, instead of like Tokyo Ghoul, there's 1,000 characters, and then we slowly get like glimpses into certain things, is really good. And I hope to see like Choujin X continue to evolve in that way and like really convey these ideas of more human struggles. I do wonder what they would like to like convey out of these Choujin powers, and like what other things Ishida Sui is going to address that's very human. And of course, with the first major arc wrapping up at chapter 15, the status quo kind of changes a little bit. Both Tokyo and Ellie seem to be wanting to join Yamato Mori, which is like the Choujin cops. And Tokyo admits that he doesn't have a dream, and so he'll try and find one. We still haven't seen basically anything from Azuma, but with this current point, I think it leaves off in a very open-ended way. Ishida Sui has also said there will be no chapters through all of December because he's taking a break, which, by the way, he's earned it. great job. I'm really happy with this first arc, honestly. And I'm really curious to see what they have to offer next. I definitely want... So I'm going to slow down a little bit. I really, really like Choujin X so far. I think it's conveying really interesting ideas with some very like grounded premises, despite the fact there is a lot of like grandiose stuff inside it and a lot of moments of humor even, which is really strong. I like it a lot. And so I do have some other stuff I want to talk about inside Choujin X in this first arc. I didn't get the chance to talk about Ellie and Tokyo and how they're perfect foils for each other. I didn't get the chance to talk about how Tokyo and Azuma barely interacted so far, and how Azuma has hints towards being a Choujin, despite the fact he has no actual evidence of being so. There's definitely a lot more I want to convey about Choujin X. If you guys enjoyed, hit that like button. I'll be back soon enough to be able to talk about some more stuff in the manga space. But I have a lot of passion so far for Choujin X. I'm actually very tempted to try and reread things to try and get a better understanding of even what the like talent is a curse thesis statement is trying to convey 100%. I think I missed some things even in this video. But let me know if you guys agree with that perspective on the story so far. For now, I'll be heading on out. Thank you for watching, take it easy, and I'll be back to cover Choujin X again in the future. Bye everybody.